My hands still reeked of industrial bleach when the stranger at table 6 stood up and slid $500 under his melting glass of ice water. He looked me straight in the eye and asked my name. The second I answered, he went completely still. Then he said the words that made my blood run cold. "So he really chose you." Before I could demand what he meant, my phone, a burner I'd bought at a gas station, exploded with calls from the family who'd publicly disowned me exactly 7 days ago. The family who had no idea I wasn't just their failure of a daughter. I was the federal agent who'd been building their destruction piece by piece for 3 years. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how a birthday party became a declaration of war. The Marrow house smelled like white lilies, expensive champagne, and the specific metallic scent of judgment. I stood in the center of the ballroom wearing a silk dress my mother had selected, pale blue, restrictive, designed to make me look like a trophy instead of a person. 200 guests filled the vaulted space. Dallas socialites in cocktail dresses that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Church elders in their Sunday suits despite it being Saturday night, business partners laughing too loud at jokes that weren't funny. The air conditioning couldn't quite mask the smell of old money and older secrets. "Happy birthday, Emma!" My father's voice boomed through the sound system with that practiced warmth that had charmed millions of dollars from widows' pension funds. Pastor Richard Hayes stood on the raised dais holding a microphone like it was an extension of his body. To the city of Dallas, he was a spiritual leader. The man with the silver tongue and the golden smile who broadcast morality every Sunday morning to 50,000 homes. To me, he was the man who checked the odometer on my car every night to make sure I hadn't driven anywhere unauthorized. The room went quiet. 200 faces turned toward me like sunflowers tracking the sun. My mother, Catherine Hayes, stood beside Richard with her hands clasped, radiating the cold elegance of a marble statue. She wore Chanel and diamonds and an expression that could freeze blood. My younger sister, Ashley, stood to my right, holding her phone up with the ring light attachment she never left home without. At 22, Ashley had turned narcissism into a career. 40,000 Instagram followers watched her curate a life of luxury and casual cruelty. She was live streaming right now. She was always live streaming. "We have a special gift for you tonight, Emma," Richard said, his voice carrying that boom of practiced authority. "You're 25 today, a quarter of a century. It's time for you to understand the value of the life we've given you." He beckoned me forward. Every instinct I'd developed over 3 years of undercover work screamed at me to stay calm, stay collected, observe, and record. But the daughter part of me, the part I'd tried to bury under layers of federal training and forensic accounting expertise, that part still hoped, still wanted this to be a real gift, still wanted, pathetically, desperately, for my father to say he was proud of me. I walked to the dais. My heels clicked against the marble floor, each step echoing in the silence. Richard handed me a heavy leather portfolio. It was thick, bound in dark calfskin with my initials embossed in gold leaf, E.H. I took it. The weight surprised me. I expected a deed to a house, maybe a trust fund maturity document, or even just a Bible passed down through generations, something normal families did at milestone birthdays. I opened the cover. It wasn't a deed. It was a spreadsheet. The first page was titled in bold, merciless font, "Fiscal Responsibility, Year 1 to 25. I stared at the lines. My eyes refused to focus at first, my brain rejecting what it was seeing. Then the numbers sharpened into terrifying clarity. Obstetrics and delivery fee, $12,000 formula and diapers. Year 0 to 2, $4,500. Private elementary tuition, $80,000 orthodontics, braces and retainer. $6,000 ballet lessons, mandatory. $15,000 room and board, calculated at market rate, $300,000. The list went on. Page after page, every meal I'd eaten, every doctor's visit, every piece of clothing, every Christmas present, every breath I'd taken in their house had been logged, quantified, and billed. At the bottom of the final page was a grand total, bolded and underlined, $2,147,583.29. Below that, a single line of text, Payment due immediately. The room tilted sideways. Someone in the crowd gasped, whether at the audacity or the creativity of the cruelty, I couldn't tell. I looked up at Richard. He wasn't smiling anymore. He looked solemn, like a judge passing a necessary sentence.
"We raised you with the best of everything, Emma,"
he said into the microphone, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "But we've noticed a lack of gratitude, a lack of connection to the values of this family. You take, you consume, but you don't contribute." This was the moment my training should have kicked in. The moment I should have recognized the performance for what it was, a public shaming designed to justify what came next. But instead, the old Emma surfaced, the one who still desperately needed her father's approval. "I graduated summa cum laude," I said. My voice came out smaller than I intended. "I made senior analyst at Pelton & Rowe in 3 years. I work 60-hour weeks. At a job where you're currently under investigation for fraud," Richard interrupted smoothly. The room went completely silent. "What?" The word came out as a whisper. Catherine stepped forward. She didn't need a microphone. Her voice had the sharp snap of a whip. "We're cutting the cord, Emma, for your own good. You need to learn what the world actually costs." She walked to an easel I hadn't noticed before. On it sat a framed photograph of the 4 of us, the perfect Hayes family portrait from last Christmas. With a single violent motion, Catherine ripped the photo in half, tearing me away from them. She dropped my half onto the floor. The room gasped. It was theatrical. It was performative. It was exactly what they wanted. Ashley giggled, a high, cruel sound that her phone's microphone caught perfectly. She stepped closer, camera lens pointed directly at my face. "Oh my God, look at her face," Ashley whispered to her thousands of followers, her voice dripping with performative concern. "Dad is literally teaching her the biggest lesson right now. Tough love, guys. It's so necessary." She held out her hand, palm up. "Keys, Emma. The Mercedes is under the family trust. You know the rules." Here's where I made my first mistake. A good federal agent would have stayed calm, would have played the victim perfectly, documented the abuse, used it as leverage later. But I was still part daughter, and that part was furious. "You want the keys?" I pulled the key fob from my clutch and held it up. "You want to take everything I've worked for? Fine, but let's be clear about something." I turned to address the crowd, my voice rising. This was the mistake. The loss of control. Every single person in this room knows exactly what this family is. You know where the money comes from. You know what happens to the donation funds. You know about the shell companies and the offshore accounts and the— "Emma." Richard's voice cut through mine like a blade, not loud, just cold. "You're embarrassing yourself." But the damage was done. I'd shown anger. I'd shown emotion. In the video that Ashley was gleefully recording, I looked exactly like what they needed me to be, unstable, vindictive, out of control. From the crowd, a man in a gray suit stepped forward. Brandon Wolfe, senior executive from Pelton & Rowe Assurance, the firm where I'd worked for 3 years, where I'd just been promoted to senior analyst 2 months ago. I recognized him immediately, and my stomach dropped. Richard nodded to him. "Go ahead, Brandon." Wolfe looked uncomfortable, but he cleared his throat and spoke loud enough for the front rows to hear. "Emma, given the discrepancies we found in your compliance reports this week, the firm is terminating your employment effective immediately. We're classifying it as termination for cause due to suspected internal fraud. Security has already cleared your desk." The breath left my lungs. It was a lie, a complete, fabricated lie. I was the one who caught errors in compliance reports. I was the one who stayed late fixing the lapses of the partners who were too drunk at lunch to remember what they'd signed. But Richard sat on the board of directors for the firm's biggest charity partner. He'd pulled the strings. They'd made one phone call, and my entire professional reputation had been incinerated. They hadn't just cut me off financially. They'd burned the bridge, salted the earth, and nuked the horizon behind me. Home. Gone. Family. Gone. Car. Gone. Career. Gone. In 5 minutes, 200 people had watched the execution, and they were waiting. waiting for me to scream, to cry, to beg, to fall to my knees and plead for forgiveness for sins I hadn't committed. They wanted the breakdown. They wanted the drama to validate their cruelty. I looked at the invoice again, at the sum total of my life reduced to dollars and cents. Something inside me snapped, but it didn't break. It calcified. It turned into something cold and hard, like the diamonds on Catherine's wrist. I closed the leather portfolio. The sound was soft, a dull thud that seemed louder than the silence in the room. I looked Richard in the eye, not at the camera, not at the crowd. "Transaction noted," I said. My voice was steady. It was the voice of an auditor closing a file. I placed the portfolio on the table next to the uncut birthday cake, a massive thing with 25 candles that would never be lit. I reached into my clutch, took out the key fob for the Mercedes, and dropped it into Ashley's glass of champagne. It splashed onto her designer dress. She shrieked, but I was already turning away. I walked through the crowd. The guests parted like I was radioactive, shrinking away from the contaminated girl. Someone's perfume was too strong. Chanel No. 5, the same scent Catherine wore. It made my stomach turn. I walked out the double doors, down the grand staircase, and into the night. It was raining. Of course it was raining. I walked 3 miles in heels until the blisters burst and my feet left bloody prints on the sidewalk. Then I took the heels off and walked 2 more miles barefoot, the pavement still warm from the day's heat, the rain mixing with something on my face that might have been tears but felt more like steam. I found a motel that took cash. $40 a night, bedspread that smelled like cigarettes and regret, a shower with water pressure that barely qualified as a drizzle. That was 7 days ago. 7 days of silence. 7 days of hiding in Irving, Texas, a suburb just far enough from Dallas to feel like exile. 7 days of washing dishes and trying to figure out how to survive when your resume has been branded with the word fraud and your bank accounts have been frozen by your father's influence. 7 days of pretending to be nobody while preparing to become everyone's worst nightmare. The diner in Irving didn't have a name, just a flickering neon sign that said "Open 24 hours" in red letters that buzzed like dying wasps. The place smelled of burnt grease, stale coffee, and the particular desperation of people who ate breakfast at 3 in the afternoon because they couldn't afford anything else. I stood at the industrial sink in the back, hands submerged in gray water that was supposed to be hot but had settled into a lukewarm purgatory. My fingers were wrinkled and raw. The skin around my nails cracked from the cheap bleach they used in the industrial dishwasher. A cast iron skillet sat on the drying rack, scorched with the remains of someone's burnt eggs. I scrubbed at it with steel wool, feeling the familiar sting where I'd torn a hangnail that morning. The pain was sharp and specific, the only thing that felt real. I didn't belong here. Or perhaps, according to the people who raised me, this was exactly where I belonged. "Order up!" The cook's voice cut through the clatter of dishes. His name was Ramon, and he had the efficient movements of someone who'd worked in kitchens for 30 years and stopped caring about the food somewhere around year 5. Betty kicked open the swinging door with her hip, balancing a tray of dirty plates. She was 50-something, with gray hair pulled into a tight bun and a face that had seen too much to be surprised by anything. She slid the bus tub onto the counter with a crash that rattled my teeth. "Table 6 wants to see you," she said, popping her gum. I paused, the sponge dripping dirty water down my wrist. "I don't see customers. I'm back of house." "I know that, and you know that, but table 6 doesn't seem to care." Betty pulled something from her apron pocket, a bill. It was crisp. It was purple. $500. My stomach turned over. In a place where a 20% tip on the Grand Slam breakfast special was cause for celebration, $500 wasn't a gratuity. It was a signal. "Who is it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Some old guy. Suit looks cheap, but his shoes don't. He's been sitting there for an hour drinking ice water. Left this on the table and said he won't leave until the girl who washes the dishes comes out." I looked at the bill in her hand. Andrew Jackson's face stared back at me from the purple paper, calm, assured, printed on currency that most people in this diner would never see in their lifetime. This was a test, or a trap, or both. I wiped my hands on my stained apron, took a breath that tasted of stale frying oil, and pushed through the swinging doors. The diner was mostly empty. Tuesday, late evening, the dead hour between dinner rush and the late-night trucker crowd. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow-green. Table 6 was in the back corner, under a flickering neon beer sign that advertised a brand that had gone out of business in the 90s. The man sitting there was in his 60s, maybe older. He had the kind of gray hair that was cut with precision, and though he wore a generic windbreaker, his shoes were Italian leather, soft and well-worn, the kind that cost $1,000 and looked better with age. He had a glass of ice water in front of him. The cubes were mostly melted. I walked over, keeping my distance. 3 years of undercover work had taught me that in unfamiliar situations, distance was safety. "You left something," I said, nodding at the money still sitting under the condensation ring of his glass. He looked up. His eyes were sharp, intelligent, entirely out of place in a diner that smelled like old bacon grease and broken dreams. He didn't smile. He studied my face like he was cross-referencing it with a file in his head. "I watched you work for an hour," he said. His voice was low, cultured, devoid of the local Texas drawl. "You stack the plates by size before you rack them. You segregate the silverware by type. You check the rims of glasses twice for lipstick stains." I shrugged, feeling the weight of fatigue in my shoulders. "It's efficient." "It's disciplined," he corrected. Then he leaned forward, just an inch. "What's your name?" Every alarm bell from my training went off at once. This wasn't a random question. This was someone who already knew the answer, testing to see if I'd tell the truth. I hesitated. For a week, I'd been just, "Hey you," or "new girl." Giving my name felt dangerous. It felt like giving coordinates for a missile strike. But the $500 sat there, heavy with implication, demanding acknowledgement. "Emma Hayes," I said. The reaction was immediate. The man went completely still. It wasn't fear, and it wasn't surprise. It was recognition. Like he'd just heard a password that had been lost for decades. He exhaled a breath he seemed to have been holding since I'd walked out of the kitchen. "So it's true," he murmured, more to himself than to me. "He really chose you." The air in the diner seemed to drop 10 degrees. The buzz of the neon sign faded into a dull hum in my ears. I opened my mouth to ask who he was, what I'd been chosen for, but before I could speak, the world tilted sideways. My phone, the burner I'd bought at a convenience store with the last of my cash, began to vibrate against my hip. It buzzed once, then again. Then it began a continuous, angry spasm. I pulled it out. The screen lit up the dim corner of the diner. It wasn't just a call. It was a barrage. Notifications cascaded down the screen in a waterfall of digital panic. Missed call, Richard Hayes, 3. Missed call, Ashley, 7. Text from Catherine. "Pick up the phone, we know you're in Irving." Text from Derek Sullivan. "You need to stop this right now." My heart hammered against my ribs. Derek Sullivan, my brother-in-law, Ashley's husband, the man who'd married into the family 3 years ago and immediately started managing the real estate portfolio with all the financial acumen of a gambling addict. How did they find this number? I'd been careful. I'd been a ghost. I looked up at the man. He was standing now, leaving the $500 on the table like it meant nothing. "You should answer that," he said, his voice calm, almost amused. "It seems the invoice has been adjusted." "Wait," I said, taking a step forward. "Who are you? How do you know about—" He turned toward the door, the neon sign buzzing loudly, masking the sound of his footsteps. "Consider that $500 a retainer, Miss Hayes," he said over his shoulder. "The game has changed." He pushed the door open and stepped out into the humid Texas night. The bell above the door jingled cheerfully, mocking the absolute chaos that was erupting on my phone screen. I looked down at the device. Ashley was calling again. I looked at the money, and for the first time in a week, I didn't feel like the victim. I felt like the person holding the weapon. I picked up the $500. It felt crisp and dangerous in my hand. I swiped the green icon on my phone, bringing it to my ear. "Hello, family," I said. My voice didn't shake. The girl who washed dishes was gone. Emma Hayes was back, and she had just received her first payment. I pushed through the rear exit of the diner, leaving the smell of stale coffee and industrial cleaner behind me. The heavy steel door slammed shut, cutting off the murmur of the few remaining patrons and the clatter of Ramon scraping down the grill. Outside, the Texas air was thick and humid, sticking to my skin like a second layer of grime. The parking lot was poorly lit, a patchwork of asphalt cracks and oil stains illuminated by a single flickering sodium street lamp. I didn't walk toward the bus stop. I didn't walk toward the cheap motel where my family assumed I was crying into a pillowcase stained with yesterday's mascara. Instead, I walked toward the far edge of the lot, where the shadows were deepest. A black SUV was waiting, idling, the engine purring with a low sub-bass frequency you felt in your chest rather than heard. The windows were tinted to complete opacity. As I approached, the rear door clicked and swung open. I didn't hesitate. I slid into the back seat. The interior smelled of conditioned leather and sterile recycled air, a sharp, violent contrast to the diner grease that coated my hair and clothes. The door sealed shut with a heavy, pressurized thud, silencing the outside world completely. "Good evening, Agent Hayes," the driver said. He didn't turn around. He was a silhouette against the dashboard lights, a man I knew only as Carter, my security detail for the past 3 years. "Take me to the Astor," I said. My voice sounded different in the quiet of the cabin. The service industry deference was gone. The exhaustion remained, but it had hardened into something useful. Carter nodded once and shifted the vehicle into gear. We rolled out of the lot, tires crunching softly on gravel before hitting smooth pavement. We merged onto the highway, heading back toward the skyline of Dallas that glowed purple and gold in the distance like a throne of light. I looked down at my hands. They were red, raw, trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline crash. I rested them on the cool leather of the seat. In the pocket of my stained apron, the $500 felt heavy, like a loaded magazine. The drive took 20 minutes. We bypassed the suburbs where the Hayes family reigned supreme and headed straight for the heart of the city. The Astor residences rose out of the arts district like a shard of black obsidian, a 60-story needle of glass and steel that looked down on the rest of Dallas with architectural disdain. Carter pulled into the underground entrance, bypassing the valet and resident parking, descending 3 levels deep into a private garage reserved for high-security tenants. The car stopped. "Clear," Carter said. I stepped out. The concrete bunker was silent except for the hum of ventilation systems. I walked to a dedicated elevator bank in the corner, unadorned, unmarked. I pressed my palm against the biometric scanner on the wall. A beam of blue light swept across my skin, reading the unique topography of my hand. Grease, scars, and all. "Access granted," a synthesized voice stated. The door slid open. I stepped inside, and the elevator shot upward, ascending 58 floors in under 30 seconds. My ears popped. When the doors opened again, I wasn't in a home. I was in a command center. The penthouse at the Astor was 5,000 square feet of minimalism and function. There were no family photos, no throw pillows, no warm touches of domesticity. The floors were polished concrete, cold under my bare feet. The walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a panoramic view of the city that had just chewed me up and spit me out. But the centerpiece of the room wasn't the view. It was the workstation that dominated the north wall. A bank of 6 monitors sat dark and dormant. Server racks hummed quietly in a climate-controlled alcove. A long table was covered in maps, schematics, and forensic accounting flowcharts that would mean nothing to a casual observer, but told me everything about where the Hayes family money actually went. I stripped off the diner apron and let it fall to the floor. I kicked off the cheap non-slip shoes that made my feet ache. I walked barefoot across the cold concrete to the bathroom, a space that looked more like a sterilization chamber than anything designed for comfort. I turned the shower on as hot as it would go. I scrubbed. I scrubbed until my skin was pink and the smell of fried onions was replaced by the scent of unscented clinical soap. I washed the waitress away. I washed the victim away. When I stepped out, wrapped in a thick white robe, I felt clean. Cold, but clean. I walked to the main living area. I didn't turn on the overhead lights. The glow of the city was enough. I approached the west wall where a large abstract painting hung, all sharp angles and aggressive brushstrokes that supposedly represented urban decay, according to the artist's statement. I reached behind the frame and pressed a concealed release. The painting swung outward on silent hinges, revealing a wall safe. I keyed in the code. 20 digits long, a sequence I'd memorized 3 years ago, built from dates that meant nothing to anyone but me. The lock disengaged with a heavy mechanical clack. Inside, there was no jewelry. There was no cash. There were only 3 thick, color-coded files. I took them out and carried them to the glass table in the center of the room. This was the truth that Richard, Catherine, and Ashley were too arrogant to see. They thought I was a failure. They thought I was the dull, unimaginative daughter who crunched numbers for an insurance firm because she lacked the charisma to be a star like Ashley, the vision to be a leader like Richard, the social grace to be powerful like Catherine. They were half right. I did crunch numbers, but I didn't work for Pelton and Rowe Assurance. That job, the one I'd been so publicly fired from at my birthday party, was a cover, a non-official cover identity in bureau terminology, ANOC. I was a senior forensic auditor for the Civic Integrity Bureau. The CIB didn't have a press secretary. We didn't have a website. We were an interagency task force designed to dismantle large-scale financial fraud hiding behind the shields of nonprofit status and religious exemptions. We targeted the untouchables, the billionaires who used charities as piggy banks, the pastors who used congregations as tax shelters, the executives who built empires on the backs of people who could least afford to be robbed. And for 3 years, my target had been my own bloodline. I sat down and opened the first file. It was blue. I flipped through the pages. It was a masterpiece of forensic accounting. If I did say so myself. I'd tracked every donation, every tithe, every love offering Richard had solicited over the last decade. I had the routing numbers showing how funds meant for the homeless outreach program were siphoned into shell companies registered in the Cayman Islands. I had the invoices for the private jets listed as missionary transport vehicles. Jets that had never touched down in a mission field, only in Cabo and Aspen. I had emails from Richard to the church treasurer, instructing him to reallocate disaster relief funds to operational necessities, which turned out to be the mortgage on the lake house in Highland Park. I closed it and opened the second file. Read. This was Catherine's Kingdom, a charity supposedly dedicated to children's literacy. My analysis showed that 80% of the operating budget went to administrative consulting fees paid to firms owned by Catherine's college friends. The actual literacy programs, they bought 1,200 books over 3 years. 1,200 for a foundation that reported raising $4 million. It wasn't a charity. It was a social club that didn't pay taxes. Then the third file. Black. Derek, my brother-in-law, the man who'd married Ashley and immediately began managing the family's real estate portfolio. The man who looked at me with pity while he stole the silverware. The file contained evidence of a Ponzi scheme so fragile that a single gust of wind would knock it over. He was leveraging properties that didn't exist to secure loans for properties he couldn't afford. The Vista Verde luxury condo development he'd been bragging about for 2 years? The construction had stalled because he'd spent the development funds on down payments for other projects, which he'd funded by borrowing against the first project's projected revenue. It was a house of cards built on a foundation of lies glued together with fraud. For 3 years, I'd built these files. I'd gathered evidence piece by painstaking piece, sitting at their dinner tables, smiling at their insults, playing the role of the quiet, disappointing daughter who couldn't quite get her life together. I could have arrested them a year ago. I could have ended it then. But I hadn't. Because they were family. Because some small, stupid part of me, the part that was still 10 years old and waiting for Daddy to say I'm proud of you, had hoped I was wrong. I'd hoped that if I dug deep enough, I'd find a legitimate explanation. I'd hoped that the donations were just poorly tracked, that the consulting fees were genuine, that Derek was simply incompetent rather than criminal. I'd given them every chance to prove they were decent people, and they'd failed spectacularly. The invoice, that goddamn invoice for my childhood, that was the final test, the moment I'd been dreading and, if I was honest with myself, hoping would never come. They didn't just fail. They performed their failure in front of 200 witnesses. They weaponized my existence, turned my life into a balance sheet, and presented me with a bill for being born. I looked at the phone sitting on the table. The screen was dark now. The barrage of calls had stopped, likely because they were plotting their next move. Or perhaps because Ashley was busy editing her live stream footage into a viral "my sister had a breakdown" video for her followers. I reached for the sleek, secure handset that sat on the workstation desk. This wasn't a burner. This was a direct line to the bureau. I lifted the receiver. It dialed automatically. "Verification required," a voice said on the other end. "Agent Emma Hayes, badge number 4902, clearance level Obsidian." There was a pause, followed by a series of digital handshakes, voice print analysis, background encryption. "Identity confirmed. Go ahead, Agent Hayes." I looked at the 3 files spread out before me. Blue, red, black. The colors of my family's destruction. "I'm initiating an active operation," I said. My voice was as cold as the air conditioning. "Authorization code 70 Alpha. Initiate Nightfall Protocol." The operator on the other end paused. The Nightfall Protocol wasn't a standard investigation. It was scorched earth. It meant total asset freezing, immediate surveillance, and the mobilization of forensic teams to secure physical evidence before it could be shredded. "Confirmed targets?" the operator asked, their tone sharpening with professional focus. "Target 1, Richard Hayes. Target 2, Catherine Hayes. Target 3, Derek Sullivan. Secondary targets include all associated shell entities listed in case file Bravo 17. "Copy that, Agent Hayes. We're spooling up the forensic teams now. We can have writs of seizure ready within 12 hours. Do you want us to bring them in?" "No," I said, "not yet." I looked out the window at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Richard was probably celebrating his victory, thinking he'd finally cut off the dead weight, thinking he'd taught me a lesson about gratitude and family values. He had no idea what was coming. "Freeze their liquidity first," I ordered. "Block the offshore transfers. Flag every credit card, every checking account, every investment portfolio. I want them to wake up tomorrow morning and find out their gold cards are just colorful pieces of plastic. I want the water cut off. I want them to feel what I felt." "Understood. The chill on assets will be active by 0600 hours. Is there anything else?" "Yes." I pulled the $500 bill from my apron pocket and smoothed it out on the table. "I want a deep dive trace on a specific cash transaction that occurred tonight. A $500 bill." I recited the serial number from memory. I hadn't needed to look at it closely. I remembered everything. "Find out where it came from. Find out who withdrew it. And find out why James Monroe is hand-delivering cash in Irving Diners." The operator hesitated. "Monroe? The former trustee for the William Hayes estate?" "The same," I said. "Copy that. We're on it." A pause. "Good hunting, Agent Hayes." The line clicked dead. I sat back in the ergonomic chair. The silence in the penthouse was heavy, but it wasn't lonely. It was pregnant with kinetic energy, the feeling before a thunderstorm breaks. I wasn't just a disgruntled daughter with a grudge. I was the point of the spear for a federal investigation. I had a team of forensic accountants, cybersecurity experts, and field agents waiting for my command. The Hayes family thought they'd broken me. They thought they'd stripped me of my resources, my dignity, my future. They didn't realize that the resources they'd taken, the trust fund, the Mercedes, the condo in Uptown, those were just toys. Props for the cover identity. I had the law. I had the truth. And I had the files. I reached into the pocket of my robe and pulled out the $500 bill again. I smoothed it out on the glass table, placing it directly on top of the black file, Derek's file. It looked small against the vastness of the room, but it drew the eye. It was the only chaotic element in a space of perfect order. The stranger, James Monroe, had said it was a retainer. He'd said my grandfather, William Hayes, had chosen me. My grandfather was supposed to be senile. He was supposed to be locked away in a high-end memory care facility called Serenity Garden, drooling and staring at walls while Richard and Catherine spent his fortune on lake house mortgages and private jets. That was the story I'd been told for 5 years. But senile men don't send envoys with $500 bills and coded messages. If William was lucid, if he was making moves, then the board was bigger than I'd thought. I stared at the money. "This isn't a tip," I whispered to the empty room. I stood up and walked to the window, placing my hand against the cold glass. Below me, the city slept, unaware that a storm was brewing. "It's the buy-in." I looked at my reflection in the glass. The grease was gone. The fear was gone. But so was the girl who'd walked into that ballroom hoping for a birthday gift. In her place stood someone harder, someone colder, someone who knew exactly how much a soul cost when you itemized it on a spreadsheet. Let them have their night, I thought. Let them sleep in their silk sheets and dream of their victory. Because when the sun comes up, the bank is closed. I turned away from the window, leaving only the glow of the servers and the single crisp $500 bill on the table. The invoice had been presented. Tomorrow, I'd start collecting payment. The nightfall protocol hit at exactly 6 a.m. I watched it happen from my penthouse, 6 monitors glowing in the pre-dawn darkness, tracking the digital detonation in real time. Monitor 1, Richard's American Express black card, declined at a Starbucks on Mockingbird Lane. The barista's face on the security camera footage showed confusion, then embarrassment on Richard's behalf. He tried 2 more cards. Both declined. Monitor 2, Catherine's automatic mortgage payment for the lake house, returned for insufficient funds. The email notification from First National Bank was professionally apologetic and absolutely devastating. Monitor 3, Derek's construction crew at Vista Verde. 17 men standing in the parking lot checking their phones. Their paychecks had bounced. Again. For the 3rd week in a row. I watched them pack up their tools and walk off the job site. Monitor 4, the Hayes family joint checking account, frozen by federal seizure order. Balance visible but untouchable, $347,582. 16, locked behind a wall of bureau authority. Monitor 5, offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, flagged by FinCEN, assets frozen pending investigation. Monitor 6, the family group chat, which I'd never been removed from despite their best efforts. I'd simply muted my notifications and kept admin access through a backdoor exploit. The messages started at 6:17 a.m. Catherine, "Richard, my card isn't working. The mortgage payment bounced. What's happening?" Richard, "Stay calm. It's a banking error. I'm calling them now." Derek, "It's not an error. My accounts are frozen too. Federal seizure order. This is Emma." Ashley, "OMG, what did you do, Dad?" Richard, "I didn't do anything. Your sister is having a psychotic break. She's filed false reports with the government." Catherine, "Well, fix it. I have the garden club luncheon today, and my card was declined at the florist." I watched them turn on each other in real time, the carefully constructed facade of family unity cracking under financial pressure. No one asked if I was okay. No one wondered if I was safe. Just panic about declined credit cards and bounced checks. This should have felt satisfying. It should have felt like justice. Instead, it felt hollow. My phone buzzed. Not the burner, my secure bureau line. Agent Sarah Thompson, my handler, the woman who'd recruited me 3 years ago, who'd believed a 22-year-old could go undercover in her own family and come out with her sanity intact. I almost didn't answer, but Thompson wasn't someone you ignored. "Hayes," I said. "What the hell are you doing?" Thompson's voice was sharp, clipped. "I just got a call from the assistant director. You initiated nightfall without clearance." "I have clearance. Authorization 70 Alpha. "That's for imminent threat situations, Emma, not personal vendettas." The words hit like a slap. "This isn't personal." "Really? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you froze your family's assets 12 hours after they publicly humiliated you. That's the definition of personal." I closed my eyes. She was right, and I hated that she was right. "They're liquidating evidence," I said, forcing my voice to stay professional. "Derek Sullivan is attempting to sell Parcel 4 Bravo, 12 acres worth $18 million. If that sale goes through, the money disappears offshore and we lose our leverage. So file an injunction, go through proper channels. Don't launch a full asset freeze without consultation." Thompson's voice softened slightly. "Emma, I know what they did to you was cruel. But you're the subject's daughter. Defense attorneys will claim bias. They'll say you fabricated evidence out of spite. You need to step back." "I'm the only one who knows where all the bodies are buried." "That's exactly the problem. You're too close. I'm pulling you off the case." The words landed like a physical blow. "You can't." "I can, and I am. Effective immediately. You're on administrative leave pending review. Hand over your case files to Rodriguez. Let him finish this." Jake Rodriguez was a good agent. Thorough, by the book, completely lacking in imagination. He'd spend 6 months building a case I could close in 6 days. "Sarah, please." "It's not a request, Hayes. You've done excellent work. The files you've built are airtight, but you're compromised. Stand down." The line went dead. I sat in the silence of the penthouse, staring at the monitors showing my family's financial collapse. I should stand down. I should hand over the files, let Rodriguez take point, step back, and let the system work. But the system was slow, and Richard was smart, and if I gave him time, he'd find a way to wiggle free. They always did, men like him with money and connections and the ability to convince people that God was on their side. I looked at the blue file, the red file, the black file. Then I closed my laptop, severing the connection to the Bureau network. I was going rogue. It was a mistake, probably the biggest one I'd made yet, but I was too far gone to stop. I pulled up the county land records on my personal laptop, the one that wasn't connected to Bureau servers, the one that couldn't be monitored by Thompson or her oversight team. Parcel 4. Bravo, 12.3 acres, Las Colinas, Texas. Zoned commercial high density. Current market value, $18.2 million. The parcel sat right next to the new corporate headquarters of a major tech company. Any commercial developer would kill for that location. It was prime real estate and Derek needed it desperately. I dug deeper into the county clerk's database. There was a pending sale contract filed 48 hours ago. Seller, Hayes, Family Trust. Buyer, Apex Commercial Consortium. Price, $18 million. Closing date, Friday, 3 days from now. Derek was planning to use that $18 million to plug the hole in Vista Verde, pay off the construction crew, appease the bank, buy himself another 6 months to keep the Ponzi scheme running. But something nagged at me about that parcel. I'd seen it mentioned in one of William's old documents, back when I was first building the files. I pulled up a subfolder I'd labeled William Hayes, Estate Planning. There. A deed transfer from 7 years ago. I read it once, then again, then a third time, my heart rate accelerating with each pass. 7 years ago, before the supposed dementia, before Richard and Catherine had him declared incompetent, William had moved Parcel 4 Bravo out of the general family estate. He'd placed it into something called an irrevocable grantor trust. The beneficiary language was specific, written in careful legalese that left no room for interpretation. To be held for the sole benefit of the eldest living issue of my daughter, Catherine Hayes, upon said issue reaching the age of 25 years. I checked the date of the deed transfer. I checked my birth certificate. The eldest living issue. That was me. Upon reaching 25, that was 2 weeks ago, at my birthday party, the same party where they'd handed me an invoice and destroyed my life. The land didn't belong to the Hayes Family Trust. It didn't belong to Richard or Catherine or the church. It belonged to me. Technically, the title transfer hadn't been formalized because I didn't know it existed. Richard and Catherine had been operating under their power of attorney over the estate, assuming they controlled everything William owned. But irrevocable trusts were exactly that, irrevocable. Even with power of attorney, they couldn't sell property that was no longer technically part of the estate. Derek was about to commit a felony, selling property he didn't own. I could file an injunction, stop the sale legally, tie it up in court for months. But that was the obvious move, the predictable move. I thought about Richard's sermon voice, smooth as silk, convincing people that giving him money was the same as giving it to God. I thought about Catherine ripping that photograph in half. I thought about Ashley's giggling live stream, and I decided to do something much more creative. I logged into the Dallas Municipal Planning portal using my bureau credentials that gave me expedited access to file public interest petitions. I drafted a petition for immediate rezoning of Parcel 4 Bravo. I cited an obscure environmental study from 2010 that mentioned a drainage basin on the eastern edge of the property. I argued that the land was crucial for flood control in the district. I proposed that the designation be changed from commercial high density to protected community green space and public utility reserve. If the land was commercial, it was worth $18 million. If it was a protected green space where you couldn't build anything taller than a gazebo, it was worth maybe $40,000. Derek's bailout would evaporate. I attached the petition. I flagged it as urgent environmental hazard. I hovered my finger over the submit button. This wasn't justice anymore. This was revenge. This was cruelty disguised as bureaucratic procedure. I thought about Thompson's words. "You're too close. You're compromised." She was right. I pressed submit anyway. The screen flashed green. Submission received. Pending review. Notice of rezoning dispute sent to title holder. Since the title was currently in limbo between the estate and the trust, the notice would go to the contact on file for the sale. That was Derek. I leaned back in my chair and waited. It took exactly 47 minutes. My burner phone, the one with the number only my family knew, started vibrating. Incoming call, Derek Sullivan. I let it ring. Incoming call, Richard Hayes. I let it ring. Incoming call, Catherine Hayes. I let it ring. The family group chat exploded. Derek, Violet, Emma, whoever you are now, call me. The land sale is frozen. There's a regulatory dispute. This is you. Richard, Emma, this is going too far. Call me immediately. Catherine, you're destroying this family. I hope you're proud of yourself. I watched the messages scroll past, each one more desperate than the last. Then Derek tried a different tactic. He texted me directly on the burner. Derek, Emma, we need to talk. There's been a misunderstanding. Derek, the land sale is for the family. It's for your mom. Don't do this. Derek, I can get you a new car. Not a Mercedes, a Porsche. Cash. Just withdraw the filing. I stared at that last message. A Porsche. He thought he could buy me off with a car. A car purchased with money he was stealing from investors, paid for by the very land he was trying to sell illegally. The audacity was almost impressive. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened a new browser window and checked the trending topics on social media. There it was, climbing the charts. #FreeEmma. Someone had clipped Ashley's live stream from my birthday party, the part where Catherine ripped the photo, where Richard presented the invoice. It had been edited, set to dramatic music, and posted with the caption, "Family or Cult? Pastor's daughter invoiced for her own childhood." It had 2.3 million views. The Hayes family's carefully crafted image was cracking in real time, and I was just getting started. The holding room at the Dallas Federal Building was painted institutional beige, the kind of color scientifically designed to drain hope from the human soul. It smelled of floor wax, stale coffee, and the particular fear that comes from realizing the cavalry isn't coming. Ashley sat on the far side of the steel table, unrecognizable without her ring light and filters. She was just a terrified 22-year-old girl in a designer dress that was now wrinkled and stained with sweat. Her mascara had run in jagged black rivers down her cheeks. She'd been detained for 4 hours. The official reason? Providing material support for theft of federal property by confirming on a live stream that Richard had authorized Derek to take my car. Accessory after the fact. It was a thin charge designed to scare rather than stick. But Ashley didn't know that. I swiped my badge at the door and stepped inside. Ashley's head snapped up when she saw me. Her face crumpled. "Emma!" she wailed. "Oh my God, Emma, get me out of here! They took my phone. They took my purse. They won't let me call Dad. You have to tell them this is a mistake." I didn't answer immediately. I pulled out the metal chair opposite her and sat down, placing a legal pad and pen on the table, aligning them perfectly with the edge of the steel surface. I looked at her, not like a sister, like a witness. "It's not a mistake, Ashley," I said calmly. "You're currently a person of interest in a felony investigation involving theft of federal property. You admitted on a live stream in front of 8,000 witnesses that you knew Derek had possession of the vehicle and that our father authorized him to take it. That makes you an accessory." Ashley's breathing accelerated. "But I didn't mean it like that. I was creating content. It was for engagement." "The content is evidence now." I let that sink in. Ashley looked around the room wildly, like she was searching for a camera, for her audience, for someone to validate her existence. But there was no one. Just concrete walls and fluorescent lights and the sister she'd giggled at while their father destroyed her life. "Right now," I continued, "the U.S. attorney is deciding whether to charge you. If they do, the maximum sentence is 5 years. Federal prison, Ashley. Not county jail, federal." 5 years? Her voice cracked. "Emma, I have a brand deal with Heavy Water launching on Tuesday. I can't go to prison. I have a following. I have—" She stopped, realizing how absurd she sounded. I felt a flash of something. Pity? Contempt? I couldn't tell anymore. "I can make it go away," I said quietly. Ashley stopped crying instantly. She looked at me, eyes wide and desperate. "What?" "I can talk to the agents. I can tell them you were coerced. I can tell them you didn't know the car was federal property. I can have you released within the hour with nothing more than a warning." Ashley nodded frantically. "Yes. Yes, please, Emma. Please, I'll do anything." I picked up the pen. "I don't want anything, Ashley. I want the truth." "About what?" "About Derek," I said. "And about Dad." Ashley hesitated. The loyalty programming ran deep in the Hayes family. We were taught from birth that we protected the brand at all costs. But Ashley was weak, and she was scared, and right now the brand wasn't here to save her. "I know Derek has a second phone," I said. It was a calculated guess based on the encrypted network traffic I'd seen in my surveillance, but I delivered it with absolute certainty. Ashley's eyes flickered. She looked down at her lap. "How did you know?" she whispered. "Because men who steal $18 million don't use their family plan to coordinate the transfers. Where is it?" "He keeps it in his gym bag," she said, her voice barely audible. "In the bottom lining. He thinks I don't know, but I saw him texting on it last month when we were in Cabo." "Did you look at it?" Ashley bit her lip. She looked guilty, not about the potential fraud, but about the invasion of privacy. "I thought he was cheating on me," she confessed. "He's been so secretive, disappearing for hours, buying things but never bringing them home. So one night when he was in the shower, I guessed his passcode." "You guessed it?" "It's his high school football jersey number and the word winner." She said it with the exhausted tone of someone who'd married a man-child. "He's not very creative." I wrote that down. Winner 88. Christ. "What was on the phone?" "That's the weird thing. He wasn't cheating. At least not like I thought. There were dozens of texts to this woman named Elena, but they weren't romantic. They were just lists." "Lists?" "Yeah, like model numbers or catalog codes. And prices. Huge prices. 40,000, 60,000. She looked up at me, seeking some kind of validation. "He's spending a fortune, Emma. I thought he was buying gifts for a mistress, but he never brings anything home. He just meets her, gives her money and leaves." My mind clicked into place like tumblers in a lock. "Elena," I said. "Does she work at the vault?" Ashley's eyes widened. "Yes, that boutique in Highland Park, the one that sells vintage watches and the Birkins you have to be on a wait list for. How did you—" I didn't answer. I was already 3 steps ahead. Derek wasn't cheating. He was laundering money. It was textbook. Take dirty money. Money skimmed from church donation funds or construction loans. Walk into a high-end boutique. Buy a $60,000 Patek Philippe watch or a $40,000 handbag. Pay cash or use a shell account. The item is portable, untraceable, and most importantly, it holds its value. Sell it in Hong Kong or Dubai a week later for nearly what you paid. Suddenly, you have clean money from a private asset sale. No questions asked. Did you take pictures of the texts? I asked. Ashley nodded slowly. I took screenshots. I sent them to my hidden folder. I was going to use them to confront him if he ever tried to leave me. Jesus. My sister was a better investigator than half the people I worked with, and it was purely because she was paranoid and insecure. I need those photos, Ashley. She hesitated again. Emma, if I give you this, will Derek go to jail? I looked at her carefully. This was the moment, the choice between family loyalty and self-preservation. Derek is already going to jail, Ashley. He was arrested for grand theft auto 4 hours ago. The only question now is whether he goes down alone or if he drags you down with him. She flinched like I'd struck her. Okay, she whispered. Okay, they have my phone. The code is 4444. It's in a folder disguised as a calculator app. I made a note. Is there anything else? I asked. Ashley shifted in her chair. She looked like she was debating whether to play her final card. There's a voice memo, she said softly. From 3 days ago, we were fighting. I was screaming at him about money, asking why we were so cash poor if he was developing this huge condo project. I told him he was a loser. I suppressed a grimace. Their marriage sounded delightful. And he snapped, Ashley continued. He started yelling that it wasn't his fault. He said he wanted to pull the plug on Vista Verde months ago, but Dad wouldn't let him. I went very still. Richard wouldn't let him? Ashley nodded. I record all our fights, in case I need receipts for a divorce. In the recording, Derek says, I'm just the bagman, Ashley. Your father is the one moving the pieces. He's the one who said we needed to drain the construction loans to cover the church's losses on the crypto investment. If I go down, Richard goes down. The air in the interrogation room seemed to vanish. This was it. This was the smoking gun. For 3 years, I'd suspected Richard was the architect, but I'd never been able to prove he was directly controlling Derek's shell companies. I'd always assumed Derek was the rogue element and Richard was just willfully blind. But if Derek admitted on tape that Richard directed the fraud, that he ordered the embezzlement of construction funds to cover gambling losses in cryptocurrency, that was conspiracy. That was RICO. That was 20 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole. I stood up. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. Not joy, but the heavy, cold satisfaction of an equation finally balancing. You did good, Ashley, I said. Ashley looked at me with tear-filled eyes. Can I go now? Can I get my phone back? I need to post a statement. I need to control the narrative before the blogs pick this up. I looked down at her. Even now, facing the destruction of her entire family, she was worried about the blogs. I'll talk to the agents, I said. You'll be processed as a cooperating witness. You'll be out in an hour. I turned to the door. Emma, she called out. I stopped, my hand on the handle. Do you think the brands will drop me? I looked back at her. She looked so small in that metal chair. Ashley, I said gently, the brands are the least of your problems. You need to find a lawyer who isn't on Dad's payroll, because when this recording comes out, the only brand associated with the name Hayes is going to be a prison number. The call came at 9:47 p.m. Catherine Hayes, mobile. I stared at the screen for 3 rings, watching my mother's name flash in the darkness of the penthouse. I almost didn't answer, but there was something I needed to know, something that had been eating at me since the moment she'd ripped that photograph. I swiped to accept. Violet, Emma. Catherine's voice was raw, stripped of its usual cold control. She'd been crying. Emma, please. My cards aren't working. I have 0 in the account. 0. I know, I said. You have to fix this. You have to call whoever you called and make them stop. I don't have access to anything. The mortgage payment bounced. The club membership is lapsing. Emma, everyone will know. Everyone will know. Not, I'm scared or I need help. Just the terror of public embarrassment. I can stop it, I lied. The sobbing on the other end stopped instantly. You can? I can talk to the prosecutors. I can tell them you were a victim. that Richard and Derek manipulated you, that you didn't know about the laundering. Yes! Catherine's voice was desperate, grasping. Yes, that's exactly what happened. I didn't know. Richard handles the finances. I just sign the papers he puts in front of me. I'm innocent, Emma. You know I am. I closed my eyes. I have a question, Mom, and your answer will determine if I make that call. Anything. Ask me anything. I need proof that you have no other assets. The feds think you're hiding money. If I can prove you're destitute, they might release maintenance funds. I am destitute, she shrieked. Look at the accounts. I need to know about the contingency, I said. It was a complete shot in the dark, based on nothing but a hunch and a single line in William's old letters about Catherine's paranoia. There was a pause, too long. What contingency? She asked, too quickly. The one you kept hidden from Richard, I said, keeping my voice bored, clinical. If you don't tell me, the forensic accountants will find it anyway. And if they find it, you go to jail for concealment. Another pause, then the sound of a zipper. It isn't much, Catherine whispered. It's just in case Richard did something stupid. Where is it, Mom? In the vanity, in the master bathroom, behind the false bottom of the jewelry drawer. There's a ledger and a key to a safety deposit box at First National. My heart was pounding. What's in the box? Diamonds, she confessed, the word tumbling out in a rush. Loose stones and cash, about 400,000. It's my run money, Emma. Please don't let them take it. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. She hadn't been a passive victim. She'd been hedging her bets. While Richard stole from the church and Derek ran his Ponzi scheme, Catherine had been quietly building an escape hatch. She was ready to abandon ship the second it started sinking, but she wanted to take a lifeboat full of diamonds first. Thank you, Mother, I said. That's very helpful. So you'll call them? You'll stop this? I looked out at the Dallas skyline, at the lights of Highland Park where Catherine sat in her multi-million-dollar house, surrounded by furniture she couldn't afford, wearing jewelry purchased with stolen donations. Mom, I have one more question, and I need you to answer honestly. Okay. Do you want to save me, or do you want to save the house? The silence that followed was the longest of my life. 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15. I needed her to say, you. I needed her to choose her daughter over real estate. Even after everything, some pathetic part of me still hoped for a mother who would pick her child. I can't live on the street, Emma, Catherine finally whispered, the knife twisted in my gut. Clean, precise, fatal. Okay, I said. My voice sounded far away. I understand. So you'll help me? You'll unfreeze the accounts? No, Mother, I'm not calling the prosecutors to save you. I'm calling them to tell them where to find the diamonds. What? But I told you, you said… I lied. You taught me how. You taught me that love is a transaction. Well, congratulations. The transaction is declined. Emma, you can't… I hung up. I sat in the darkness for a long time, the phone still in my hand. Carter's voice came through the intercom. Miss Hayes, are you all right? I'm fine, I said. I just killed my mother. Ma'am? Not literally, but I killed the idea of her. The version I wanted her to be. I stood up, walked to the window and looked at my reflection in the glass. This was the moment I crossed the line from justice to vengeance. I wasn't doing this for the victims of the fraud anymore. I wasn't doing this to uphold the law. I was doing it because they deserved to suffer, and I was going to make sure they did. Juniper and stone smelled like roasted fair trade beans and old money. It was the kind of place where a latte cost $9 and the walls were made entirely of glass, designed specifically so the people inside could be seen by the people outside, ensuring everyone knew exactly who could afford to waste time there on a Wednesday afternoon. I sat at a corner table with a clear view of the entrance. I'd ordered an iced oat milk matcha that I had no intention of drinking. My hands were folded on the marble tabletop, resting next to my phone. The time was 12:45 p.m. To my right, 3 tables away, a man in a navy blazer read a newspaper. That was Agent Jake Rodriguez. Near the barista station, a woman obsessively checked her watch. Agent Lisa Park. Carter was outside in the SUV, monitoring the perimeter. We weren't here for a reunion. We were here for a confession. The plan was simple. I knew my family. If I gave them a location, they wouldn't come to talk. They'd come to extract. They needed to silence me before the zoning board reviewed my petition. They needed to paint me as incompetent, hysterical, dangerous. They would be loud. They would be performative. And they would be careless. At 12:52, the door swung open. Derek led the charge, wearing aviator sunglasses indoors. Behind him was Catherine, clutching a handkerchief to her chest like she was attending a funeral. And flanking them was Ashley, phone already raised, ring light blazing like the Eye of Sauron. Her live stream counter read, 6,247 viewers. I watched them scan the room. When their eyes landed on me, the performance began instantly. "There she is!" Catherine cried out, her voice pitched perfectly to turn every head in the cafe. "Oh, thank God, Emma!" She rushed toward me, arms outstretched, a masterclass in maternal acting. If I hadn't known she'd chosen the house over me 3 days ago, I might have believed her. I didn't stand. I remained seated, spine pressed against the cool leather chair. Catherine reached me and tried to pull me into a hug. I shifted slightly, causing her to grab empty air. She stumbled, catching herself on the table. "Emma, honey, please!" She sobbed loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. "We've been so worried. You stopped taking your medication. You disappeared." I looked at her calmly. "I'm not on medication, Mother." She ignored me, turning to the audience of strangers watching from nearby tables. "She's confused. She's been under so much stress. She needs help." Ashley was circling us like a shark, camera lens focused tight on my face. The viewer count climbed. 7,000. 8,000. "Guys, we found her," Ashley whispered dramatically into her microphone. "She's at Juniper and Stone. She looks really out of it. We're just trying to get her home safely. Please keep praying." Derek stepped forward, looming over the table. He was trying to use his physical size to intimidate, a tactic that had worked when I was 16. It didn't work now. "Okay, Emma, show's over," Derek said, his voice low and threatening, though he kept a fake smile for the witnesses. "We're going to the car. Dad has a doctor waiting at the house." "I'm not going anywhere with you, Derek." "You don't have a choice." He grabbed my upper arm, his grip bruising. "You filed that petition to rezone the land. You're trying to bankrupt this family. You're coming with us and you're going to sign the withdrawal papers or I swear to God." He stopped, realizing people were watching. He softened his tone, but squeezed harder. "We're just worried about you. You're not yourself. Come on, the car is outside." I looked at his hand on my arm. Then I looked him in the eye. "Speaking of cars, Derek," I said clearly, "where's mine?" Derek blinked. The question threw him completely off script. He'd expected screaming, fighting, tears, not an inventory check. "What? The Mercedes?" "The one I drove to the party, the one you took the keys for. Where is it?" Ashley zoomed in. The live stream comments were scrolling too fast to read. Why is she asking about a car? Is she broke? Wait, did they steal her car? Derek scoffed, releasing my arm to adjust his jacket. "Who cares about the car, Emma? It's safe. I drove it home." I leaned forward. "You drove it home?" "Yes, I drove it home," Derek snapped, his patience fraying. "It's parked at your dad's house. Although, I did you a favor. I scraped the bumper on the gate because the brakes are shot. You're lucky I didn't bill you for whiplash. Now get up." I smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. "So you admit you're in possession of the vehicle? And that you drove it without my permission? And that you damaged it?" Derek rolled his eyes, looking at Ashley's camera, playing to the crowd. "She's obsessed with material things. It's a sickness, guys. Emma, it's a family car. Dad paid for the lease. I can drive it whenever I want." "No, Derek," I said. "Dad paid for the lease on the E-Class 3 years ago. That lease expired last month." The car I drove to the party is a 2024 model. It's not registered to Richard Hayes. It's not registered to the Hayes Family Trust. The room went quiet. Even the barista stopped grinding beans. The car is registered to Sentinel Logistics LLC, I continued, my voice cutting through the silence like a scalpel. That's a holding entity for the Civic Integrity Bureau. It's a federal government fleet vehicle assigned to an active field agent for operational use. Derek's face went pale. The color drained so fast it looked like a magic trick. What? He whispered. You took a federal vehicle, Derek. You removed it from my possession. You drove it across city lines, and by your own admission, you damaged government property. I stood up slowly. That isn't a family dispute. That's grand theft auto and misappropriation of federal assets. Ashley gasped. The phone in her hand shook. No! She shrieked, panic rising. That's a lie. Dad gave him the keys. Dad said it was fine. Thank you, Ashley, I said, looking directly into her lens. You just testified on a global live stream that Richard Hayes authorized the theft. That makes him an accessory. Catherine looked around wildly. Emma, stop this. You're making a scene. I'm not making a scene, Mother. I'm making an arrest. I nodded to the man in the navy blazer. Agent Rodriguez stood up, pulling a badge from his jacket. It caught the afternoon sun, flashing gold and silver. Derek Sullivan, he said, his voice booming across the cafe. Please place your hands behind your back. Derek stumbled backward, knocking over a chair. No, wait! This is a mistake! It's my sister-in-law's car. She's crazy. Rodriguez didn't argue. He moved with efficient, practiced speed. He spun Derek around and clicked handcuffs onto his wrists. The sound of ratcheting steel was louder than any scream. You're being detained for theft of government property, Rodriguez stated. And while we're at it, Mr. Sullivan, we have questions about wire transfers you made from the Vista Verde construction accounts this morning. Derek's eyes bulged. He looked at me, at the handcuffs, at Ashley, who was still filming. Ashley! Derek screamed. Turn it off! Call your dad! Ashley didn't turn it off. She was frozen, the phone trembling in her hand. The comments had shifted. OMG, he got arrested. Did she say federal agent? Wait, the sister isn't crazy. #free. Emma is real. Catherine grabbed Rodriguez's arm. You can't do this. Do you know who we are? We're the Hayes family. Agent Park stepped between them. Step back, ma'am, or you'll be joining him for obstruction of justice. Derek was dragged toward the door, crying now. The tough guy act evaporated, replaced by terrified sobbing. Emma, he yelled over his shoulder. Emma, tell them it was a joke. I watched him go. I took a sip of my watered-down matcha. It tasted sweet. White Rock Lake sat on the eastern edge of Dallas, a pocket of nature surrounded by urban sprawl. The marina was quiet at sunset, just the gentle lap of water against dock pilings and the distant hum of highway traffic. I stood at the entrance to Dock 4, watching a cabin cruiser rock gently in the evening breeze. The boat's name was painted in fading letters, The Long Game. James Monroe stood on the aft deck, wearing the same windbreaker from the diner, but beside him, wrapped in a blanket against the evening chill, sat a man I hadn't seen lucid in 5 years. William Hayes, my grandfather. He looked older, frailer than I remembered. But as I approached down the weathered dock, he turned his head. His eyes were clear, sharp, alive. Emma, he said. His voice was raspy like dry leaves, but steady. I stopped 10 feet away, my hand instinctively moving to the weapon I wasn't carrying. Grandpa? Come closer, child. I won't bite. I walked forward slowly, my boots echoing on the wooden planks. William studied my face with the same intensity James had shown at the diner. You look like your grandmother. She had that same fire, that same refusal to break. They told me you were senile, I said. My voice came out rougher than I intended. For 5 years, I visited you. You didn't know my name. You didn't recognize me. I know. William's expression was pained. James, show her the letter. James handed me a cream-colored envelope, sealed with red wax bearing the original Hayes family crest. I broke the seal and read, My dearest Emma, if you are reading this, it means you have stopped waiting for them to apologize. Good. I am sorry I was not lucid when you visited. Richard and Catherine had me at Serenity Garden on enough medication to tranquilize a horse. Aggressive dementia management, they called it. It kept me docile. It kept me silent. It kept them in control of my estate. I let them think I was lost because 5 years ago I realized if I fought them, they would destroy everything I built just to spite me. So I played the fool. I let them lock me away so I could watch them from the shadows. But I watched you too, Emma. I saw them punish you for being smart. I saw them hate you for being honest. And I saw you refuse to break. The $500 was a test. Most people, when handed money in desperation, spend it, greed, hide it, shame, or cry over it, broken. You kept it like a weapon. You analyzed it. That told me you're a soldier, not a victim. I am not lost, my dear. I am waiting, and now that you have the knife in your hand, it's time to cut the ropes. Trust James. He's the only man in Dallas Richard couldn't buy. Grandfather, my hands were shaking when I finished reading. You were awake, I whispered. All those times I sat by your bed, telling you about my day, crying because I thought you were gone. I wasn't awake then, William interrupted gently. James has a contact at Serenity Garden, a nurse who's been swapping my sedatives for saline for the past week. This clarity is new, Emma. And it won't last if they catch on. I looked at James. Why now? Why reveal this now? Because Richard is cornered, James said. Derek's arrest, the frozen accounts, the zoning petition, you've backed him into a corner, and cornered animals are dangerous. William reached into the blanket and pulled out a leather-bound folder. This is the Hayes Renewal Trust. I drafted it 7 years ago before they had me declared incompetent. It's a dormant legal entity that sits above the family trust. It has supreme authority over all assets, the church, the land, the construction company, everything. He handed it to me. It has one trigger condition, William continued. It can only be activated by a direct blood descendant who can prove the current trustees violated their fiduciary and moral duties. I flipped through the document. The legal language was dense but clear. I've already proved it, I said. Derek's in custody. I have evidence of... That's the legal proof, James interrupted. But William included a second clause, a character clause. I looked up sharply. William's eyes met mine. The heir who activates this trust must stand before the accused and offer them a chance at redemption. The words hit me like cold water. Redemption? I said. After what they did? It's not about saving them, William said. It's about proving you're not like them. Richard destroys people to save himself. I need to know if you can offer mercy even when you hold the gun. I thought about the invoice, the torn photograph, Catherine choosing the house over me. What if I can't? I asked quietly. What if I don't want to offer mercy? Then you become them, William said simply. And the cycle continues. James stepped forward. Richard is organizing an emergency church service this Sunday. He's calling it the Service of Divine Restitution. He's going to stand in front of 5,000 people and blame you for everything. The frozen accounts, Derek's arrest, all of it. He'll paint you as mentally ill, vindictive, possessed by demons. Let him, I said. If you go to that church, James continued, if you walk into that lion's den and face him, you can activate the trust, but you have to do it publicly. You have to let him try to destroy you, and you have to offer him redemption before you pull the trigger. I looked at the $500 bill in my pocket, creased now, worn from being carried like a talisman. What happens if he refuses redemption? I asked. William smiled grimly. Then you'll have witnesses to his damnation. 5,000 of them. I looked out at the darkening water, the city lights beginning to blink on across the lake. Tell me about the trust, I said. What happens when I activate it? All assets transfer to your control, James said. Richard and Catherine are removed as trustees. The church board answers to you. The foundation answers to you. The land, including Parcel 4 Bravo, legally becomes yours. And the victims? The people they stole from? That's up to you, William said.
You can liquidate everything and disappear.
Or you can make it right. I thought about the elderly woman who'd donated her Social Security check to the Homeless Outreach Fund that never housed a single homeless person. I thought about the Vista Verde investors who'd lost their retirement savings. I thought about Betty at the diner, who'd shown me kindness when I had nothing. I want to make it right, I said. William nodded slowly. Then you'll need this. He handed me a single key on a simple chain. What's this? Safety deposit box. First National Bank. Box 447. Inside, you'll find the original documentation for all of my assets. The ones Richard thinks he controls and the ones he doesn't know exist. William's expression was fierce. I've been preparing for this day for 7 years, Emma. I just needed to know you were ready. I closed my fingers around the key. I'm ready, I said. Good. William gestured to the boat's cabin. Then let's talk about Sunday. Let's talk about how we're going to make Richard Hayes beg for mercy he doesn't deserve. Sunday morning at Radiant Life Cathedral smelled of expensive cologne, hairspray, and the ozone tang of high-voltage stage lighting. The parking lot was chaos, luxury SUVs and sedans creating gridlock, while traffic control officers in high-visibility vests waved cars into overflowing lanes. Above the main entrance, a massive digital banner scrolled in blood-red letters. Emergency Revival Service, Defeating the Enemy Within. I stood at the edge of the lot, watching the faithful stream toward the glass doors. They were carrying checkbooks, phones ready to scan donation QR codes. They were walking into a shearing shed, believing they were entering a sanctuary. I wasn't wearing my diner uniform. I wore a sharp black blazer, tailored trousers, heels that clicked with authority. Behind me, James stood like a granite statue in a dark suit. Scattered through the crowd were the 6 lawyers he'd retained, plus 4 off-duty federal agents who'd volunteered to attend services. Are you ready? James asked quietly. I touched my blazer pocket. The recording device was active. The flash drive with evidence was secure. The $500 bill was folded in my breast pocket like a talisman. I'm not the one who needs to be ready, I said. We walked toward the entrance. The lobby was a crush of bodies. Greeters with frozen smiles handing out envelopes labeled Defense Fund. Large monitors played a loop of Richard's face looking solemn and persecuted. The enemy has attacked our finances, Digital Richard intoned. The enemy has attacked our family, but we will not bow to the spirit of poverty. Sow your seeds of faith today. People recognized me immediately. Whispers rippled outward like a shockwave. Is that her? That's the daughter, the crazy one. Someone call security. Ashley was near the Welcome Center, live streaming. Her eyes were puffy, makeup too heavy. When she saw me, pure terror flashed across her face. Guys, keep sending the stars, she whispered into her phone. My sister is here. I don't know what she's going to do. I didn't stop. I headed for the side corridor marked Authorized Personnel Only. 2 security guards stepped in front of me, large men with earpieces and crossed arms. Miss Hayes, the taller one said, you're not allowed back here. The pastor issued a no trespass order. I pulled out my badge, not my driver's license, but my federal credentials. This is a federal investigation, I said smoothly. Interfering with a federal agent during an inquiry is a felony obstruction charge. Do you want to join Derek Sullivan in a cell, or do you want to step aside? The guard hesitated, looked at the badge, looked at James's menacing presence behind me. He stepped aside. I walked down the hallway toward the audiovisual control room, the nerve center where they controlled lights, sound, and the massive LED wall behind the pulpit. I opened the door without knocking. 3 technicians spun around wearing headsets. Who are you? The lead tech demanded. You can't be in here. I walked to the main console and placed my flash drive on the mixing board. My name is Emma Hayes, I said calmly, and I'm the new director for today's program. The tech reached for his radio. I'm calling Richard. I rested my hand on his wrist. I wouldn't do that, not unless you want to explain to the IRS why you've been listed as an independent contractor receiving payments from a shell company that doesn't exist. He froze. Plug this in, I ordered, pointing to an HDMI port. He hesitated, then took the drive. A new folder appeared on his monitor. "Don't play it yet," I said. "Wait for my signal. And if you cut the feed or black out the screens, I'll personally ensure your name is added to the indictment list. Understand?" He nodded, pale and sweating. The door opened behind me. Richard blocked the doorway, white suit, purple tie, gold lapel pin. He looked regal under the hallway lights, but up close I could see sweat beading on his forehead, see the tremor in his hands. "Emma," he said. His voice was deep, resonant, the voice that had charmed millions. "Hello, Father." He stepped inside and closed the door, sealing us in. He gestured for the technicians to leave. They scrambled out like rats fleeing a sinking ship. We were alone. Richard smiled, a terrifying expression full of warmth that didn't reach his eyes. "You look good, Emma. Strong. I always knew you had fire. I just wish you hadn't used it to burn down your own house." "I didn't burn it," I said. "I fumigated it." He laughed softly, walking toward me. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed. "You think you've won, don't you? Derek in handcuffs. Your mother terrified, accounts frozen. It's very impressive, Emma. A very impressive tantrum." "It's not a tantrum, Richard. It's an audit." He sighed, leaning against the console. "You don't understand how the world works. You think facts matter. Evidence matters." He pointed to the monitors showing the sanctuary. 5,000 people clapping, swaying. "They don't care about your spreadsheets. They care about how I make them feel. If I walk out there and tell them you're a liar, they'll believe me." "I know," I said. "That's your power. You sell fiction." "I sell peace," he snapped, composure cracking. "And I built this church from nothing. I deserve the lifestyle, the jets." "And the embezzlement?" I asked. "The Las Colinas land, the Vista Verde fraud, is that also what you deserve?" "It's investment," he shouted, "for the future of the family, for you." "Don't." I held up a hand. "Don't pretend this was for me. You handed me an invoice for existing." Richard took a breath, regaining control. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document. "Fine. Let's talk business." He slapped it on the mixing board. "This is a statement saying you were confused, off your medication, that the accusations were a misunderstanding caused by your mental health crisis." I looked at the paper. A confession of insanity. "Sign it," Richard said. "I'll unfreeze the trust fund, $2 million cash. You can go to Europe. Start over. You never have to see us again." "And if I don't?" He leaned close. His breath smelled of mints and coffee. "If you don't, I will go out on that stage and I will bury you. I will tell them things about you that aren't true, but will sound true. I will make you so toxic you won't get a job at a gas station." The recording device hummed against my ribs. "So, to be clear," I said, voice pitched perfectly for the mic, "you're admitting you used the orphanage fund for the condos? You're admitting Derek acted on your orders?" Richard scoffed. "Of course I used the fund. It's my money. The church is me. Derek was just a tool, a useful idiot, but I'm the architect." The door opened. Catherine stood there in a black dress, looking like she was dressed for a funeral. Her face was stripped of makeup, pale and raw. "Lorraine! Catherine!" Richard said, confused. "What are you doing? Go to your seat." Catherine stepped inside. She looked at Richard, then at me. She'd heard him call Derek a useful idiot. She'd heard him claim the money was his, and she knew, with survivor's instinct, that she was next on the chopping block. "I'm not going to my seat, Richard," she said, voice trembling but audible. "What's wrong with you?" Richard snapped. "Don't sign it, Emma," Catherine said. Richard's eyes went wide. "Excuse me?" "He's going to sell us all out," Catherine said, looking at her husband with pure hatred. "He already cleared the joint accounts. I saw the transfer logs. You moved the last of the liquid cash to your offshore account this morning. You were planning to run." Richard raised his hand as if to strike her. I stepped between them. "Don't." Richard lowered his hand slowly. He looked at me, then at Catherine. He realized the room had turned, but he still had the stage. He straightened his tie, smoothed his jacket, looked at his reflection in the dark monitor. "Fine," he sneered.
Betray me, both of you. It doesn't matter. I'm going out there, and when I'm done speaking, this crowd will drag you out by your hair.
He stormed toward the door, slamming it behind him. The silence was deafening. I looked at the technician who'd crept back in.
Did you get that?
He pointed to the audio levels on the board.
The room mic was hot. Every word.
I turned to Catherine. Are you coming? She wiped her face. I can't watch. You have to, Mom. If you hide, you're just an accomplice. If you stand, you're a witness. She looked at me. Really looked at me. For the first time in years. You're so hard, Emma, she whispered. I had to be, I said. Let's go. The sanctuary was a physical assault of sound. 5,000 people clapping in rhythm to the drums, the bass so loud it vibrated in my chest. Richard ran onto the stage. The crowd erupted. He threw his hands up, basking in adoration. My children! He bellowed into the microphone. The enemy is at the gate. Amen! The crowd shouted back. They want to silence us. They want to take this house of God and turn it into a parking lot. They've sent agents of the government to persecute us. Boos rained from the balcony. They've turned my own daughter against me. Richard's voice cracked with performative pain. But we will not break. We will fight. But we need resources. He pointed to the screen behind him. A massive QR code appeared. Give, he commanded. Give to save this ministry. Give to save the truth. He was crying now. Fake tears streaming down his face. They say I'm a thief, he wailed. They say I stole from orphans. Look at me. Do I look like a man who would steal from God? I looked up at the technician in the booth. I raised my hand. Richard continued. My own daughter has lost her mind. She's attacking the church because... I dropped my hand. The QR code vanished. The screen went black. Then the audio from the green room exploded over the massive speakers, clear as a bell. Of course I used the fund. It's my money. The church is me. Derek was just a tool, a useful idiot. The crowd went silent. The music stopped. Richard froze, confused. Then the video started. Wire transfer logs. Photos of luxury purchases. Derek's airport arrest. Emails ordering the cover-up. And then... the recording from 5 minutes ago. Richard's face, 10 feet high, sneering.
The congregation would never know because they're too stupid to read financial reports.
5,000 people gasped as one. Richard spun to look at the screen. Saw himself. Saw his soul laid bare in high definition. He turned back to the crowd. No! He screamed, microphone feedbacking with a screech. It's a deepfake! It's AI! It's... He saw me in the wings, pointed a shaking finger. She did this! She's the liar! She's the devil! I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I simply walked onto the stage. The spotlight hit me, blinding. I kept walking until I stood center stage, 10 feet from my father. The crowd murmured, a low, angry sound. I took a microphone from the stand. I'm not the devil, I said. My voice was calm, contrasting with his hysteria. I'm the auditor, and your account is closed. I looked toward the back of the sanctuary. The double doors swung open. James Monroe pushed a wheelchair down the center aisle. In the wheelchair sat William Hayes. The crowd parted. Silence fell, heavier than the noise had been. Everyone knew William, the founder, the legend, the man who was supposed to be gone. Richard looked toward the back, saw his father. His knees buckled. William's voice, amplified by the sound system, filled the cathedral. I am not senile, and I am not dead. I've been watching. He gestured to James, who held up the deed to Parcel 4 Bravo. Richard claims Emma stole the land, but a thief cannot steal what she already owns. 7 years ago, I placed that property in a trust. It doesn't belong to the church. It doesn't belong to Richard Hayes. It belongs to Emma. Richard staggered. But she's unfit. She's the only one who passed the test, William interrupted. The LED screen changed. The Hayes Renewal Trust Articles of Incorporation appeared. I am hereby activating the renewal protocol, William announced. Effective immediately. Richard Hayes and Catherine Hayes are removed as trustees. All assets transferred to the primary beneficiary, Emma Hayes. I stepped to the edge of the stage. But I won't keep it, I said. The renewal trust is not a family piggy bank. It's a restitution fund. I looked at the elders in the front row, 12 wealthy men who suddenly looked very small. The land in Las Colinas will not be sold for condos. It's been rezoned. It will become a community center and public park. The liquid assets recovered from Derek Sullivan and the offshore accounts will be used to refund every person who donated to fraudulent campaigns. I turned to Richard. You wanted a legacy, Father. This is it. You're going to pay them back. Every cent. The back doors opened again. Agent Rodriguez walked down the aisle with 4 uniformed officers, not running, not shouting, just walking with the quiet inevitability of justice. Richard saw them, looked for an exit. Security had blocked the doors. He looked at Catherine in the wings. She'd buried her face in her hands. He was alone. Rodriguez walked up the stage stairs, stopped in front of Richard. Richard Hayes, you're under arrest for wire fraud, conspiracy to commit money laundering, and embezzlement. He took the microphone from Richard's hand, turned it off, placed it on the pulpit. Turn around, please. Richard didn't fight. The fight had left him the moment William spoke. He turned. The handcuffs clicked shut. The sound echoed through the sanctuary, the loudest sound I'd ever heard. The crowd didn't riot. They just watched, the funeral of an illusion. Rodriguez led Richard toward the stairs. As they passed me, Richard stopped. He looked at me, eyes red-rimmed, exhausted. Why? He whispered. I offered you millions. What do you want, Emma? I looked him in the eye. I want my name back. Richard stared at me for a long moment. Then he looked down. They walked him off stage. The sanctuary doors closed behind them. Ashley sat on the stage floor, weeping. Her phone lay forgotten beside her. I walked over to William, knelt beside his wheelchair. He placed a hand on my shoulder. His skin was paper thin, but his grip was warm. It's done, he said softly. Yes, I said. It's done. I looked out at the empty pews. The crowd was filing out slowly, stunned into silence. The show was over. The lights were still on, but the stage was empty. 2 weeks passed in a blur of depositions, press conferences, and forensic accounting reviews. Richard Hayes, indicted on 14 federal counts, bail denied due to flight risk, held at the Dallas County Detention Center pending trial. Derek Sullivan, pleaded guilty to 8 counts in exchange for testimony against Richard, sentenced to 6 years federal prison. Catherine Hayes, charged as an accessory, released on house arrest pending trial, forced to surrender passport and the hidden diamonds. Ashley Hayes, granted immunity as a cooperating witness, posted a tearful apology video that got 23 million views. Half the comments called her brave, the other half called her complicit. The restitution process began immediately. I worked with a team of forensic accountants to track down every victim. $4.2 million returned to cathedral donors. Vista Verde investors compensated for losses. Foundation consulting fees clawed back from Catherine's friends. Parcel 4. Bravo broke ground on the William Hayes Community Center. Free after-school programs, senior services, job training for people who needed it most. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, I gave the first donation, $500. The media called me a whistleblower, a hero, the daughter who brought down a corrupt empire. Agent Thompson called me something else. You're suspended, she said when I reported to the bureau office. Pending internal review for conducting unauthorized surveillance on family members and withholding evidence from your handler. I got the conviction, I said. You got the conviction by going rogue. You're a good agent, Hayes, maybe a great one, but you're also a liability. Until we sort out what you did and why, you're on administrative leave. No badge, no gun, no access. She slid an envelope across the desk. Your final case evaluation. Read it when you're ready. I took it but didn't open it. Pelton and Rowe sent a formal apology and a job offer. I declined. The Dallas Morning News wanted an exclusive interview. I declined. Ashley wanted to do coffee and talk. I blocked her number. Catherine sent letters from house arrest. I returned them unopened. Only one person from my old life reached out in a way that mattered. William. I sat in William's new apartment, a modest two-bedroom in a senior living community that actually cared about its residents. He'd been released from Serenity Garden the day after Richard's arrest. The aggressive medication immediately discontinued. He was frail but lucid, clear, present. "You did well," he said, pouring tea with shaking hands. "You could have just destroyed them. Instead, you built something." "Is that mercy or just good PR?" I asked. He laughed, a real laugh. "Does it matter? The people are helped either way." I looked out the window at the Dallas skyline. Somewhere out there, Richard sat in a cell, probably writing sermons he'd never deliver. Catherine planned her legal defense. Ashley rebuilt her brand around accountability and growth. And I sat here, wondering what came next. "Was it worth it?" I asked quietly. "Destroying my family?" William was silent for a long moment. "That's not a question I can answer for you, Emma. Only you know what you lost and what you gained." "I lost everything," I said. "My family, my career, my identity." "No," William said firmly. "You lost the illusion of family. You lost a career built on lies. You lost an identity they forced on you." He leaned forward. "What did you gain?" I thought about Betty at the diner, about the elderly woman whose donations were returned, about the kids who'd used the community center. "The truth," I said. "I gained the truth." "And is truth enough to build a life on?" I didn't have an answer. Thompson's envelope sat on the table between us, still unopened. "Are you going to read it?" William asked. I picked it up, broke the seal. Inside was a single page. My final case evaluation. Agent Hayes demonstrated exceptional investigative skills and produced airtight evidence leading to multiple federal convictions. However, her personal involvement with the subjects compromised objectivity and violated protocols regarding conflicts of interest. Recommendation: suspension with mandatory counseling. Potential reassignment to non-field position upon reinstatement. At the bottom, Thompson had written in pen, "You're a brilliant investigator, Emma, but you need to decide if you're hunting criminals or hunting ghosts. Until you know the difference, you're too dangerous to work in the field. Take the time. Figure out who you are when you're not someone's daughter." I folded the letter and put it in my pocket. "What will you do?" William asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. For 3 years, I was Agent Hayes, undercover. Before that, I was Emma Hayes, disappointing daughter. I don't know who I am when I'm just me. Then maybe it's time to find out. 1 month after Richard's arrest, I walked into the diner in Irving. The neon sign still buzzed. The air still smelled of fried onions and diesel fumes. Betty was behind the counter, wiping down mugs. She looked up, eyes widening when she saw me. "Emma, I saw the news." She came around the counter. "You're famous. You brought down your whole family." "Just Emma, Betty. Can I get coffee and a slice of pie?" She poured the coffee without asking how I took it, black, same as always. I sat at the counter, same stool with the ripped vinyl. Betty slid the pie across. "You ever gonna tell me why you were really here?" I smiled. I needed to remember what it felt like to be nobody, so when I became somebody again, I'd remember who I was doing it for. I pulled out a new $500 bill, slid it across the counter. "What's this for?" "A tip, for reminding me that kindness doesn't cost anything, but it's worth everything." Betty pushed it back. "I can't take that." "Consider it a retainer," I said, echoing James's words. "For the next time someone shows up here broken and needs to remember they're human." Betty's eyes filled with tears. She nodded, tucking the bill into her apron. My phone buzzed. Text from James. "William wants to see you. Community center ribbon cutting tomorrow. He says it's important." I stood, left cash for the coffee and pie, added a normal-sized tip. "You leaving town?" Betty asked. I looked at my reflection in the window. The grease was gone, the fear was gone, but so was the certainty. "I don't know where I'm going yet," I said, "but I know I'm not running anymore." I walked out into the Texas sun, toward Carter's SUV waiting at the edge of the lot. The invoice had been paid, the ledger was balanced, but the question remained, what does Emma Hayes do with a life that's no longer defined by revenge? The answer, I realized, was the same as it had always been. She finds the truth, and she makes it count. The William Hayes Community Center gleamed in the afternoon sun, fresh paint, basketball hoops, a library with new books lining the shelves. I stood beside William's wheelchair at the ribbon-cutting ceremony. He was smiling, truly happy for the first time I could remember. A line had formed, people whose donations were returned, whose lives had been ruined by Richard's schemes. They came to shake my hand. One elderly woman, tears in her eyes. "You gave me back my savings. I thought it was gone forever." "I'm sorry it was taken in the first place," I said. Catherine appeared at the edge of the crowd. House arrest had ended last week. She'd pleaded guilty to lesser charges, received probation and community service. She looked smaller, older. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by mall brands. We made eye contact across the crowd. She didn't approach, just nodded. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. It was acknowledgement. I nodded back.
"You did good, Emma,"
William said quietly.
"You could have just destroyed them. Instead, you built something that will outlive all of us."
"Is that mercy or just good PR?" I asked, repeating my earlier question. "Does it matter? The people are helped either way." Across the street, I saw Ashley filming, not live streaming, just documenting. Her new content focused on accountability, recovery, redemption. I didn't know if it was genuine, but I hoped it was, because maybe some people could learn. Maybe some people could change, even if Richard never would. My phone buzzed. Email from Thompson. "Your suspension is lifted. If you want to come back, there's a position in the white-collar crime division, different city. Fresh start, no family connections. Think about it." I looked at the community center, at the kids playing basketball, at the seniors in the library, at the job training classroom where people were learning new skills. I thought about the 3 years I'd spent undercover, the lies I'd told, the family I'd destroyed. And I thought about Betty's kindness, William's wisdom, the truth I'd fought for. I didn't know what came next, but for the first time in my life, that uncertainty felt like freedom instead of fear. I texted Thompson back. "I'll think about it." Then I turned off my phone and walked into the community center, where William was waiting to show me the plaque they'd installed by the entrance. William Hayes Community Center. The truth will set you free, but first it will break your heart. Founded by Emma Hayes, in memory of what was lost and in hope of what can be built. I touched the plaque, feeling the cool metal under my fingers. The invoice had been paid in full. The ledger was balanced. And Emma Hayes, no longer anyone's daughter, no longer anyone's agent, was finally, terrifyingly, beautifully free.